The cold breath of winter crept through the trees when Mike Henderson heard it, a quiet, barely audible whimper that cut through the forest silence like a blade. A seasoned ranger at the Blue Ridge Preserve for 19 years, he knew every sound of these mountains. This one was unlike any other. This one was desperate. Mike stopped, holding his breath. His hand automatically rested on the handle of his knife, an old habit acquired after decades of living among the Appalachian wilderness. His eyes, accustomed to distinguishing the slightest movements in the thicket, peered between the bare trees, searching for the source of the sound. The whimper repeated, weaker than before. Mike moved toward the sound, his heavy boots silently stepping on the frozen ground. Years of training had taught him to move quietly, even when fallen leaves cracked underfoot. He passed two giant oaks and saw it, a tiny gray ball of fur trembling beneath the roots of a fallen tree. A wolf pup, no older than 3 weeks. Alone. Mike carefully looked around. A female wolf would never leave her cub unless. He scanned the area for traces of blood, signs of struggle. Nothing. No tracks of the pack or mother. His eyebrows drew together. In 19 years, he had never encountered an abandoned wolf pup. "What happened to you, little one?" he whispered, slowly dropping to his knees. The pup raised its head. Its eyes, blue-gray, not yet the golden color of an adult wolf, looked at Mike with a strange mixture of fear and hope. The ranger slowly removed his glove and extended his hand, allowing the pup to catch his scent. The trembling didn't stop. Mike saw the tiny chest rising beneath the thin fur from the cold. Without its mother, without a pack, it wouldn't survive the night as temperatures rapidly dropped. The decision came easily, perhaps too easily for a man who had dedicated his life to non-interference in natural cycles. Mike carefully wrapped the pup in his scarf and lifted it. The tiny body was lighter than it should have been. "Just until morning," he said quietly. "In the morning, I'll come back to look for your pack." The pup didn't struggle, just made another weak sound before nestling against the warmth of his neck. The ranger's cabin stood 8 kilometers deep in the forest. Built by his own hands, it was close enough to the eastern border of the preserve to reach when needed, but far enough from tourist trails to provide the solitude he craved. After returning from Afghanistan 13 years ago, noisy crowds and sudden sounds often triggered panic attacks. Here, among nature, he found peace. When he opened the cabin door, silence greeted him. No one was waiting for him at home. It had been that way for 7 years since Julia left, unable to bear the wilderness and his silence. The only decoration on the wall was a framed photograph, Mike, Julia, and their dog Benji, taken before everything. Before the war. Before the nightmares. "Welcome to my humble abode," he muttered, placing the wolf pup on the kitchen table. Under the bright light, he got his first good look at the little one. Gray-brown fur, skinny sides with prominent ribs, thin legs that seemed unnaturally long, like a teenager's. But most striking were the eyes, intelligent, observant, with a strange depth not characteristic of such a small creature. Mike heated some milk, though he knew it wasn't an ideal food for a wolf pup. He moistened the tip of his finger in the warm liquid and carefully touched the tiny tongue. The pup licked uncertainly, then again and again, until finally it began to drink eagerly from a small bowl. "Slower, little one," Mike said. "No one's going to take it from you." Outside the window, dusk was falling. Mike added wood to the stove and made a nest of soft towels for the pup by the fire. It immediately curled up and fell asleep. Mike sat in his worn armchair, watching it sleep. Logic told him that in the morning, he would have to take the pup back to where he found it and hope the pack would return. The Forest Service didn't approve of interfering with wildlife. But when the tiny creature quietly whimpered in its sleep, something tightened in the ranger's chest. Rising to pour himself some coffee, he suddenly froze, feeling an inexplicable chill run down his spine. A sensation he hadn't felt since his infantry days. The feeling of being watched. Mike carefully approached the window and pulled back the curtain. In the darkness beyond the trees, eyes were glowing. Not one pair. Many. Mike's hand instinctively reached for the rifle he kept by the door, but he stopped himself. Those eyes, at least 6 pairs, remained fixed on the cabin, unblinking in the darkness. They weren't approaching, just watching. The wolf pup stirred in its nest of towels, letting out a soft whimper. Mike moved away from the window, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. Years in the military had taught him to respect a potential threat but not to provoke one unnecessarily. "They're out there, aren't they?" he whispered to the pup. "Your family." The tiny wolf raised its head at the sound of his voice, ears twitching. Mike crouched beside it, studying its features more carefully. The markings around its eyes were distinctive, a darker mask-like pattern that reminded him of the alpha male he'd spotted in these parts last spring. "So you're royalty," he murmured, gently running a finger along the pup's spine. "What were you doing all alone?" Outside, a long, mournful howl broke the silence, followed by another. Not aggressive hunting calls, but something else, communication signals between pack members. Mike had studied wolf behavior enough to recognize the difference. He returned to the window. The eyes had vanished, but he knew they hadn't gone far. Wolves could travel miles in a night, yet something kept this pack circling his cabin. The obvious answer sat warming itself by his fire. "They didn't abandon you," he told the pup, "but something's keeping them from coming for you." Sleep came fitfully that night. Mike dozed in his chair, waking at every sound, the crack of a branch outside, the whisper of wind, the soft padding of tiny paws as the wolf pup explored its temporary shelter. By dawn, his back ached and his eyes burned, but the adrenaline of being watched kept him alert. First light revealed fresh tracks in the snow around his cabin, circular paths where the pack had paced all night, never approaching closer than 20 yards, never retreating farther than 50. Mike studied them from his porch, coffee mug steaming in the crisp morning air. The pup sat beside him, still wrapped in a towel, its nose twitching a familiar sense. "This isn't normal behavior," Mike said aloud. Wolves typically avoided human dwellings. If they wanted their pup back, they would have either attempted to retrieve it or abandoned it completely. He'd need to report this, though he dreaded the conversation. Park regulations were clear: minimal interference with wildlife. Taking in the pup overnight was already stretching those rules. Mike reached for his radio, but before he could call it in, movement at the forest edge caught his eye. A large gray wolf, the alpha male he recognized from its distinctive markings, stood in full view, staring directly at him. It was a deliberate appearance, almost like a message. The pup beside him wriggled excitedly, attempting a weak howl that came out as more of a squeak. The alpha made no sound in return, just maintained that unnerving stare before melting back into the trees. "What the hell is going on?" Mike muttered. His radio crackled to life before he could reach for it. "Henderson, come in." "Over." The voice belonged to Sarah Martinez, his supervisor at the ranger station. "Henderson here." "Over. We've got reports of poacher activity in your sector. Traps found near Black Oak Creek. Can you investigate?" "Over." Mike's jaw tightened. "Poachers. That might explain the pack's unusual behavior." "Copy that. I'll check it out." "Henderson out." He looked down at the pup, who was now attempting to chew on his boot lace. "So that's it. Your pack's avoiding traps." He gently scooped up the tiny wolf. "Guess you're coming with me." An hour later, Mike hiked along Black Oak Creek, the pup secure in an improvised carrier made from his backpack, its head poking out to take in the surroundings. The morning was crystal clear, the kind of winter day that made the mountains seem etched against the sky. He found the first trap exactly where Sarah had indicated, a vicious steel contraption, partially concealed under leaves. Illegal in the preserve for over a decade. Recently placed. Mike carefully disarmed it. His expression grim. The trap was baited with meat laced with something that smelled chemical. Not just trapping wolves, but poisoning them. He continued downstream, finding 2 more traps. The third had been triggered, and beside it, dark stains colored the snow. Blood. Not enough to indicate a fatal injury, but enough to tell him what had happened. "Your mother was hit," he told the pup, who whined softly as if understanding. "She couldn't come back for you." The pieces fell together. The injured wolf would have sought cover, the pack would have surrounded her protectively, and this little one had somehow been separated in the chaos. A twig snapped behind him. Mike turned sharply, instincts flaring. A man stood 20 yards away, rifle in hand. Camouflage clothing, unshaven face, cold eyes that narrowed when they locked onto Mike. "This is federal land," Mike called out, voice steady. "Hunting is prohibited." The man's gaze shifted to the disarm trap, then to the pack on Mike's chest where the wolf pup had gone completely still, as if sensing danger. "Just tracking a wounded deer," the man replied, his accent not local. "Crossed over from permitted land." A lie. Mike knew it. The man knew he knew it. "You need to come with me to the ranger station," Mike said, hand moving casually toward his sidearm. The poacher's eyes hardened. "Don't think so, Ranger." He raised his rifle, not pointing it directly at Mike, but close enough to make the threat clear. "I'll be on my way, and you'll forget you saw me." In the distance, a wolf howled. Then another. The poacher's head jerked toward the sound, momentary fear flashing across his face. Mike recognized what was happening immediately. The pack was coming. The cold air filled with howls that gradually grew closer. The poacher glanced around nervously, gripping his rifle tighter. His confidence wavered. "This is your last chance to come with me," Mike said, keeping his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "These wolves are protecting their territory, and they don't seem thrilled about your presence." The wolf pup in Mike's improvised chest carrier went still, only its tiny nose twitching slightly, catching scents. "You're bluffing," the man scoffed, but his eyes betrayed him, uncertainty flickered in them. "Wolves don't attack humans." "Usually not," Mike agreed. "But I just found blood by your traps. You injured one of their pack. Maybe killed others. Changes the equation, doesn't it?" The poacher's eyes darted between Mike, the pup, and the surrounding forest. The howls were closer now, more urgent. Mike recognized the pattern. The pack was coordinating, moving in formation. "You've got no jurisdiction," the poacher growled. "This is just business. Supply and demand. Traditional medicine markets pay top dollar for wolf parts." Mike's stomach turned. He'd encountered this before, poachers supplying black markets with animal parts. During his tours overseas, he'd seen similar justifications for all manner of cruelty. "Put the rifle down," Mike ordered, his own hand now resting openly on his sidearm. "Whatever you're getting paid, it's not worth a federal charge. Or worse." A flash of movement caught Mike's eye, a gray shadow slipping between trees to his right. Then another to his left. The pack was encircling them. The poacher saw it too. Panic replaced calculation in his eyes. He swung his rifle toward the nearest movement. "Don't," Mike shouted, drawing his sidearm. "You fire that weapon, they'll charge." Too late. The crack of the rifle split the morning air. A yelp followed, high-pitched, pained. The wolf pup in Mike's carrier began whimpering frantically. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The forest erupted with movement as wolves emerged from multiple directions. Not charging, but positioning, a hunting formation Mike had witnessed only once before, from a safe distance through binoculars. The poacher fired again wildly, missing everything. He turned to run but slipped on the frosty ground, falling hard. His rifle clattered away. Mike moved without thinking, placing himself between the fallen man and the approaching wolves. "Stay down," he ordered, holstering his weapon. Guns wouldn't help now. The large alpha male Mike had seen earlier stepped forward, hackles raised, teeth bared in a silent snarl. Blood matted the fur on its right shoulder, a fresh wound from the poacher's bullet. Mike slowly reached for the carrier, carefully lifting the pup out. His hands were steady though his heart hammered against his ribs. He crouched low, placing the pup on the ground before him. "I kept him safe," Mike said softly. He knew wolves couldn't understand human speech, but tone and intention mattered. "He's unharmed." The pup wobbled forward a few steps, then let out a high, squeaking howl. The alpha's ears pricked forward, its aggressive posture softening almost imperceptibly. Behind him, Mike heard the poacher shifting, preparing to bolt. "Don't move," he hissed. "You run. You trigger their chase instinct." Another wolf appeared, a female, moving with a pronounced limp. Mike recognized the injury pattern immediately, consistent with escaping from a steel trap. She approached cautiously, her attention fixed on the pup. The mother. Mike remained absolutely still as the female wolf cautiously approached the pup. Their reunion was quick but profound. She nuzzled the little one, who responded with excited whimpers. The alpha male maintained its position, eyes locked on Mike and the poacher. "Can't we just back away?" The poacher whispered, voice barely audible. "Not yet," Mike responded, not taking his eyes off the wolves. "They're deciding." The female wolf suddenly looked directly at Mike. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, not understanding exactly, but recognition. She had lost her pup. Mike had saved it. Now she had it back. She turned, gently picking up the pup by the scruff of its neck. The alpha male held its ground a moment longer, then slowly, deliberately, turned to follow the female. One by one, the pack melted back into the forest. The alpha was the last to leave, pausing at the tree lean to look back once more, a long, evaluating stare that Mike felt down to his bones. Then they were gone. Mike exhaled slowly, only now realizing he'd been holding his breath. Behind him, the poacher scrambled to his feet. "You're under arrest," Mike said, turning to face him. "Poaching on federal land, illegal trapping, attempted." The blow caught him by surprise, a branch the poacher had grabbed while getting up. It connected with Mike's temple, sending him staggering backward. His vision blurred, pain exploding through his skull. The poacher didn't wait. He sprinted for his fallen rifle, snatched it up, and tore off into the woods, away from where the wolves had disappeared. Mike fought to stay conscious, dropping to one knee, pressing his hand against the bleeding gash on his head. Through the ringing in his ears, he fumbled for his radio. "Henderson to base," he managed. "Suspect, armed and dangerous, heading southeast from Black Oak Creek." The radio crackled with Sarah's voice, but Mike couldn't make out the words. Darkness crept in at the edges of his vision. He tried to stand, but the forest tilted sideways. As consciousness slipped away, Mike thought he saw something at the edge of the clearing, a pair of watchful eyes. Then nothing. Mike awoke to the antiseptic smell of the ranger station's medical room. The fluorescent lights overhead sent sharp needles of pain through his skull. He tried to sit up, only to feel a firm hand on his shoulder. "Easy there, hero," Sarah Martinez said, gently pushing him back onto the cot. "Doctor says you've got a mild concussion." Mike's memories returned in fragments: the poacher, the wolves, the blow to his head. "How long was I out?" His voice sounded rough, unfamiliar. "About 4 hours. Fisher and Rodriguez found you after your radio call cut out." Sarah handed him a cup of water. "You're lucky. Temperature dropped this afternoon. You could have frozen out there." Mike took a slow sip, wincing as the movement aggravated his headache. "The poacher." Sarah's expression hardened. "Got away. For now. We found 3 more traps, though, all professionally set." She hesitated. "And a dead wolf about half a mile east. Shot clean through the chest." Mike closed his eyes, anger and regret washing over him. "Damn it. Here's where it gets interesting," Sarah continued, pulling up a chair. "A search team went back to where you were found. There were wolf tracks all around you, Mike. Dozens of them. But you weren't touched." She studied his face closely. "Want to explain how you ended up unconscious in the middle of wolf territory without becoming dinner?" The memory of the female wolf's eyes flashed in Mike's mind, that moment of connection, of understanding. "They took their pup back," he said simply. "Their pup." Sarah's eyebrows shot up. "The same one you radioed about yesterday?" Mike nodded, immediately regretting the movement. "Found it abandoned. Mother was injured in one of the traps. I kept it overnight." Sarah stared at him. "You kept a wild wolf pup? Overnight? In your cabin? It would have died otherwise." And then the pack just, "What?" "Thanked you, and left." Mike met her skeptical gaze. "Something like that." Sarah shook her head, but didn't press further. "Director wants a full report." "And Mike?" "He's not happy about any of this." After Sarah left, Mike gingerly touched the bandage on his temple. The official reprimand would come, he knew. Taking in wildlife, engaging with a poacher alone instead of calling for backup, all violations of protocol. But he couldn't bring himself to regret his actions. The doctor released him that evening with instructions to rest and watch for signs of worsening concussion. Mike declined Sarah's offer to drive him home, insisting he was fine to make the journey himself. The truth was, he needed the solitude, needed to process what had happened. The drive back to his cabin was slow, his headlights cutting through the gathering darkness as he navigated the familiar winding roads. His thoughts kept returning to the wolves, their coordinated movements, their decision not to attack, that final look from the alpha male. When he finally pulled up to his cabin, exhaustion had settled deep in his bones. He fumbled with his keys, pushed open the door, and froze. His cabin had been ransacked. Drawers pulled out, contents scattered across the floor. His old military footlocker had been forced open, the few valuables he kept, his service medals, his father's watch, gone. The poacher. It had to be. Mike's hand instinctively moved to his sidearm as he quickly cleared each room, but the intruder was long gone. When he reached his bedroom, he found a final insult spray painted across his wall. Mind your own business. He exhaled slowly, holstering his weapon. It wasn't the first threat he'd faced, and the violation of his home stirred something dark inside him, something left over from his time in combat. A part of himself he'd worked hard to leave behind. Mike stepped back onto his porch, needing air. The night was clear, stars scattered like ice crystals across the black sky. He breathed in deeply, trying to center himself. A low growl froze him in place. From the shadows at the edge of his yard, two green-gold eyes reflected the dim porch light. The alpha male stood watching him, its powerful form half hidden by darkness. "Back again?" Mike said softly, remaining absolutely still. The wolf took a step forward, then another, emerging fully into the yard. In the moonlight, Mike could see the blood matting its fur where the poacher's bullet had grazed its shoulder earlier that day. They regarded each other in silence, man and wolf separated by species and instinct, yet connected by something deeper than either. Slowly, deliberately, Mike sat down on his porch steps. The wolf maintained its distance but didn't retreat. For nearly 10 minutes, neither moved, locked in a silent communion that defied explanation. Then, as if reaching some private decision, the wolf turned and melted back into the forest. Mike remained on the steps long after it disappeared, his thoughts churning. The poacher's threat loomed in his mind. The man would be back, of that, Mike was certain. People like that didn't let go of grudges easily. And with the wolf parts fetching high prices, the entire pack remained in danger. His radio crackled from inside the ransacked cabin. Mike rose stiffly, wincing at the pain in his head, and went to answer it. "Henderson," he answered. "Mike, it's Sarah." Her voice was tight with urgency. "We've got reports of gunshots near Black Oak Ridge. Multiple shots, possibly automatic fire." Mike's blood ran cold. Black Oak Ridge was less than 2 miles from where he'd encountered the wolf pack earlier. "I'm on my way," he said, already reaching for his jacket. "No, you're on medical leave, remember? Recovery team is heading out. Just wanted to keep you in the loop." Mike stared out his window toward the dark forest where the alpha had disappeared. "Sarah, I think it's our poacher. He's going after the pack. All the more reason for you to stay put. This guy already put you in the hospital once today. Just be careful. He's not working alone. The setup is too professional." After signing off, Mike stood in the middle of his violated home, torn between following orders and following instinct. The image of the alpha standing in his yard, wounded but unbowed, filled his mind. The decision made itself. Mike grabbed his rifle, extra ammunition, and night vision equipment. The poacher had made this personal for both of them. Outside, the forest waited, alive with shadows and secrets. Somewhere in its depths, wolves ran for their lives. And Mike was going hunting. The forest at night was a different world. Even with his night vision goggles, Mike moved cautiously, each step measured and deliberate. His military training took over stay low, minimize noise, skin constantly. The throbbing in his head was a distant annoyance, pushed aside by focus and adrenaline. He followed the ridge line toward Black Oak, pausing frequently to listen. The gunshots had stopped, but the forest felt wrong, too quiet, as if the wildlife sensed danger and had gone silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. After 20 minutes, Mike caught the scent of cigarette smoke. He dropped to a crouch, switching off his night vision to eliminate the telltale green glow. Ahead, through a break in the trees, flickered the orange pinpoint of a lit cigarette. Mike circled wide, using the terrain for cover. As he drew closer, voices became audible, 2 men speaking in low tones. "Should have brought more guys," one was saying. "That pack's smart." "Doesn't matter," replied the second voice, the poacher from earlier. "Hit him with enough lead. They'll drop like anything else." Mike edged closer, belly crawling the final few yards to a fallen log. From this position, he could make out two figures, his poacher and another man, both armed with high-powered rifles equipped with thermal scopes. "I still don't get why we're risking this," the first man complained. "Forest Service is already crawling all over because of that ranger." "That's exactly why," the poacher replied. "We need to finish the job and clear out." Asian buyers offering $5,000 per wolf. Double for the alpha. The cold calculation in his voice made Mike's stomach turn. He reached for his radio to call for backup, then froze as a distant howl cut through the night, a warning call. Both poachers instantly went on alert, shouldering their rifles. "There," the second man hissed, pointing southeast. "Movement." Mike could see it too, shadows flowing between trees, the wolf pack on the move. But something was wrong. They were running directly toward the poacher's position, almost as if. "It's a trap," Mike realized with sudden clarity. The poachers had driven the wolves this way, probably using the ATV he could now hear idling somewhere to the east. Hunting wolves was illegal, but these men were professionals. Mike calculated distances, angles, options. The wolves would be in firing range within seconds. 2 poachers, at least 8 wolves. The odds favored the wolves in a direct confrontation, but thermal scopes and semi-automatic rifles changed that equation drastically. He had no choice. Mike stood, aimed his flashlight, and triggered its brightest setting directly into the poacher's position. "Forest Service," he bellowed. "Drop your weapons." Everything happened at once. The poachers whirled, temporarily blinded. One fired wildly in Mike's direction, round splintering the log where he'd been seconds before. Mike rolled, coming up with his sidearm drawn, squeezing off 2 careful shots not at the men, but at their rifles, trying to disable the weapons. A yelp of pain told him at least one round had found its mark. "My hand. He shot my damn hand." The wolves, startled by the gunfire, scattered into the brush. The poacher Mike had confronted earlier recovered faster than his partner. He shouldered his rifle one-handed, aiming directly at Mike. "You should have stayed down, Ranger," he snarled. Mike dove as the rifle cracked, feeling the round pass inches from his head. He landed hard, pain exploding through his already injured skull. His vision blurred, darkness creeping in at the edges. The poacher advanced, rifle trained on Mike's prone form. "You've been a real problem," he said, voice cold. "But problems have solutions." A low growl stopped him mid-step. From the shadows behind Mike, the alpha male emerged, hackles raised, teeth bared in a silent snarl. The poacher swung his rifle toward this new threat. "No," Mike shouted, but his warning was lost in the sudden chaos as the forest seemed to erupt with movement. Not just the alpha, the entire pack materialized from the darkness, closing in from all sides. The poachers panicked. The second man fled, disappearing into the trees as his partner fired wildly at the approaching wolves. Mike forced himself to his feet, charging the remaining poacher despite his spinning vision. The collision sent them both to the ground, Mike's momentum carrying them into a tangle of limbs and curses. The rifle discharged once more into the night sky before spinning away into the underbrush. The poacher fought with desperate strength, landing a solid blow to Mike's injured temple. Stars exploded across his vision. He felt his grip weakening, sensed the man's hand reaching for something at his belt, a knife. Cold steel pressed against Mike's throat. "Should have minded your business," the poacher hissed. A blur of motion, a flash of teeth, and suddenly the pressure was gone. The alpha had the poacher's arm in its jaws, dragging him backward with terrifying strength. The man screamed, high and panicked. More wolves closed in, not attacking but forming a ring, a living barrier. The message was unmistakable, no escape. Mike staggered to his feet, blood trickling from his reopened head wound. "Let him go," he commanded, his voice steady despite everything. The alpha's eyes locked with his, that same penetrating stare from his yard. For a heartbeat, Mike wasn't sure the wolf would obey. Then, with deliberate slowness, it released the poacher's arm and backed away, never breaking eye contact with Mike. The poacher lay whimpering, clutching his savaged arm. Mike zip-tied his wrists, careful to avoid the worst of the bite wounds, and retrieved his radio. Henderson to base. I need medical and backup at Black Oak Ridge. I've got one suspect in custody, one fled on foot. And Sarah? You're not going to believe who helped make the arrest. Dawn painted the sky in watercolor strokes of pink and gold as the Forest Service vehicles finally departed. The poachers, both now in custody, as the second man had been caught trying to escape in their hidden ATV, faced federal charges that would put them away for years. Mike sat alone on the hood of his truck, watching the last traces of night fade from the valley below. His head had been rebandaged, the concussion officially upgraded to moderate. Sarah had ordered him to take a week's medical leave after thoroughly chewing him out for disobeying direct orders. You got lucky, she'd said, eyeing the wolves that still lingered at the forest edge, watching the proceedings with eerie intelligence. Next time they might not be so selective about who they bite. Mike wasn't so sure. There had been a moment, with the knife at his throat, when he'd seen something in the alpha's eyes, a decision being made, a calculation that went beyond mere instinct. Movement caught his eye. The pack was withdrawing deeper into the forest, one by one melting into the underbrush. The alpha male was the last to leave, as always. It paused at the tree lean, looking back at Mike. This time, Mike understood the message without words. A debt had been repaid. Territory respected. Balance restored. He raised his hand in a small gesture of acknowledgement. The wolf watched him a moment longer, then turned and disappeared into the trees, a shadow among shadows. In the month that followed, Mike patrolled the eastern border of the preserve more frequently than regulations required. Occasionally, he'd catch glimpses of the pack, a flash of gray between trees, the echo of distant howls at twilight. Sometimes, on clear nights, he'd spot them on the ridge across from his cabin, silhouettes against the stars. Watching. Protecting. Just as he protected them. Sarah had asked him once, after everything had settled, what he thought the wolves understood about what had happened. They understand enough, he'd told her. Territory. Threat. Alliance. But privately, Mike wondered if it went deeper than that. If something primordial had awakened in that forest, a connection between man and wild that harked back to when their ancestors first made tentative peace around ancient fires. He'd never know for certain. Some mysteries belonged to the wilderness. But on patrol nights, when the moon rode high and the forest whispered its secrets, Mike would sometimes stop at the place where he'd first found the wolf pup, that tiny ball of fur that had changed everything. And sometimes, if he waited long enough, he'd hear the reply to his silence, a lone howl rising above the trees, acknowledged by others until the night filled with their song. Not a call of threat or hunger. A reminder that some bonds, once formed, never truly break.